Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Hampton so far, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the everyday routine of a Kriya Yoga practice and how it can fit easily into anyone's life. We will explain how simple substitutions can be put in place to save time. Bad habits set up limitations regardless of the activity, whether it's sports, playing a musical instrument, business. Living is still the same. Practice makes perfect, only when practice is perfect. Listen as Swami defines a perfect practice of Kriya Yoga and how to apply it to your life. Learn about the features and benefits of this commitment. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. So, Swami, let's get right to it. We're talking about the bad habits that can set up limitations. And when we talked about regardless of your activities such as sports, it reminded me of the fact that every day I kind of tune in to what's going on with the Olympics, and it seems that most of the Olympians have the same, they all kind of echo the same message when they're interviewed, and that is, they have this determination, they have this, they're goal-oriented. Of course, they work hard and they're dedicated. So maybe those are some of the things that we can employ in all aspects of our lives.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. But I think the point that we're trying to make here is that things have procedure. That if you are going to play a sporting event, or if you are involved in a musical instrument or business, whatever it is that you're doing, that things have procedure, and that living, really, there is a secret to life. There is a way of getting the most out of this human experience. And that's one of the things that we really want to bring to the table here, is that this secret to life was something that was actually found in our religious communities, in the realms of religion, where they taught us a game plan, a way to approach our lives that we would get the best return for our efforts. And that's basically what Kriya Yoga is. It's a way of approaching your life that will give you the best result. And this whole thing of practice makes perfect only when practice is perfect is a really important thing that you want to try and embrace. I know a lot of times that type of language today is met with a lot of resistance, simply because we just keep lowering the bar. We keep lowering the standard to which we live to in order to try and make it work, as opposed to passing on the responsibility to the individual to rise, to meet the demands that really come with this choice that you would make.
I think a lot of people have a challenge in embracing a spiritual way of life in this day and age, so to speak, where we're so technology-driven, and technology does a lot of things for us that normally it would take us, hours or days or weeks to accomplish. So how does a person try to find that balance between both worlds, living the spiritual path and embracing all the things that we are bombarded with every day.
Well, my answer to that has been is you really have to examine why it isn't working, because I really think that it's our spiritual communities that have failed, that our religions are not doing what they were intended to do, and so as a result, it seems like we can blame technology. But the reality is that you really need what we talked about here in this introduction is a perfect practice. Because if what you're practicing isn't going to give you the result, then you're putting all your efforts into something that isn't working, and you're putting a lot of your efforts into pretending that it's doing what it was intended to do. And so I really think that where you want to really kind of put your efforts is finding a metaphysical or a mystical system that is intact, that is actually giving you the results that you're looking for. Because that, I think, is the biggest problem, is that people are doing these watered-down, diluted practices and pretending because they don't have good leadership. You don't have people that are genuinely connected to this life force guiding you. So you are still embroiled in the physical world. You're trying to do something from a position that won't even enable you to get the result that you're looking for, and yet you spend all your time measuring yourself next to somebody who's doing the exact same thing that you're doing. And so it kind of gives you the illusion that you are being spiritual. But in order to really make this work, and you really have to break down your spiritual practice so that you're accommodating all of the different facets of it, so that you are employing all of the things that will give you the best result. And that's what we want to talk about here today is like, what does it look like when somebody is living this way? Because most people think that you have to go and live in a cave in order to really, you have to kind of get away from technology. You have to get away from the modern conveniences that we have. And it's been my experience that you don't have to get away from them. You just have to connect to a resource of energy that is available to you no matter where you are. But you have to resonate to the frequencies of it. That it's not just an intellectual accomplishment, that it is physics. That there is, you have to attune yourself to this invisible, intangible source of sustenance. And in order to do that, you have to enlist some strategies. And basically, it doesn't mean that you have to try and put your foot on your head for 2 hours every day. Is not necessarily going to get you what it is that you're really looking for, which is this internal connection of the individual with this invisible, intangible source of sustenance.
So you remind me of that saying that we say, and that is your practice failing you, or are you failing the practice? It kind of sounds like that's what you're saying. So how should one employ these strategies? What's like the first thing we should do when we wake up in the morning?
Well, the things that you want to really kind of target are the things that we do the most. And so it starts basically with skillful use of thought. So when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that you want to maybe check on is, am I thinking right? And in this model, there is such a thing as thinking right. And it comes back to this secret of life. Am I putting God first? Am I using what it is that I really do need to validate fears and demands that are coming from my physical body? Have I changed the reward circuits in my brain? Have I changed these neurological pathways so that I'm using what I need to produce the feeling in my body that I'm happy? And from that platform, then everything else will start to come together. But what I've found is that most people don't have that in place. And so they continue to draw from a resource of energy that is limiting. So you start your day with skillful use of thought. The other aspect is the two things that we are doing the most is thinking and breathing. And the whole thing in Kriya Yoga, which is what we call pranayama, is the relationship between life-sustaining force number 1, thought, and life-sustaining force number 2, breath. And so breathing right, getting your maximum volume of oxygen, the 3-part breath, so that when you inhale, your diaphragm comes down, and that's what brings air into the lower portion of the lungs. You continue to inhale, your ribs expand out, that fills the midsection of your lungs. You continue to inhale, your shoulders lift up, and that fills the tops of the lungs. Then when you exhale, shoulders come down, ribs squeeze in, diaphragm pulls back up. Now, practicing that particular exercise will help you change your default breath pattern so that eventually you will do 3-part breath consciously or unconsciously. And the only time you'll revert back to a shallower breath would be if the air quality was questionable. If there was dust or smoke in the air, you would go back to protect the body and doing a shallow breath. But for the most part, those would be the things that you would want to have in place for your everyday. No matter what you were going to do the rest of the day, if you were thinking right and you were breathing right, you'd pretty much be in bedrock. Then, of course, you would look at your next life-sustaining force would be water. Am I hydrated? Drinking enough pure water is an important part of the practice. Keeping your body hydrated, keeping, all of your systems function. The body is 70 to 80% water. And keeping ourselves hydrated is an important part of that. And the next thing that you would look at would be what we call skillful use of food. That with regard to diet, the yoga prescription for food has typically been your primary source of nourishment are foods that get their nourishment from the sun. So one of the things that you might want to look at is the whole concept of a vegan diet. Fruits, vegetables, grains, seeds, nuts, and legumes, because they are considered primary sources of nourishment. And then, of course, your secondary source of nourishment would be animals that get their nourishment from foods that get their nourishment from the sun. And your third choice would be animals that eat other animals. And so just using that simple guideline, you could start to structure a diet for yourself that would accommodate this practice. Because remember, the goal here is not to become compulsive or become neurotic about food. The goal here is to become addicted to the life force. And one of the things that is required is that you have to take foods that will not produce cravings or disturbances, because it produces too much of a frequency that will keep you attached to things that are visible and tangible or invisible and tangible. It will keep you attached to particles and waves. See, the benefit of a yoga practice is that you basically don't draw from the outside world, that you actually draw from the inner world, this world of prana, the life force, and that becomes your primary source of nurturance. And the foods that you eat can be a big distraction. So eliminating foods that produce cravings and disturbances is really what you're trying to do. And of course, in the framework of doing that, you may actually find that you get good results with foods that get their nourishment from their sun, basically.
All right, well, that's great information. I think what we'll do is we're going to pause at this moment to hear a word from our sponsors. So, listeners, we'll be back in a few moments.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a Samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Starting with the separation from mother, including the labors and tasks of the hero and the return as a whole person. Practice makes perfect only when practice is whole. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. Samadhi, or total consciousness, is experienced by knowing and doing with devotion. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
And welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So we are talking about how to employ these strategies to live in a day of a life of a yogi. And I like what we say in Kriya Yoga, and that is the skillful use of thought, skillful use of breath, skillful use of water, and skillful use of food, because there are, especially with the water and the food, there are optimal times when you should be drinking water and optimal food that can be put together to nourish the body even better. So if we do all of that, that really kind of gives us a better platform for, physiologically speaking and physically speaking, for the human body. So we do all that, and then now what comes next?
Well, the thing that you want to start to do is you want to adopt it more as a lifestyle than an activity that you do independent of life. It's one of the things that I see a lot of times. I hear people, I'm going to go and meditate. And so that becomes an activity that you do independent of your life. When you're literally practicing Kriya Yoga, meditation isn't an activity you do independent of life. It is a state of being. That you now are doing your everyday routine at a different level of consciousness and a different degree of awareness. So that you want to actually perform everything that you do in a meditative state. By enlisting and adopting these lifestyle strategies as opposed to an isolated activity that you do independent of life, you incorporate your spiritual practice becomes your lifestyle. And like I said, in order to really do that, you have to have all of these things in place. And probably the one thing that will have to be incorporated is skillful use of exercise today, because our lifestyle today, for the most part, is too sedentary. A lot of us just aren't doing what it is that would give us the ability to develop ourselves physically. Because when yoga was codified in 200 BCE, people sat on the floor, they worked in the fields. Today, we sit on a chair, we sit on a couch, we work at a desk, we don't move in the way that would give us the physiology that would be required for us to actually resonate to the frequencies of this invisible, intangible resource. So skillful use of exercise then becomes probably the one thing that you would incorporate that would be an isolated activity that could possibly be independent of your life. But you don't have to do it for 3 hours a day. That if you balanced it out and maybe dedicated somewhere in the vicinity of on a minimum of about 30 minutes a day, that you could actually maintain a level of fitness that would enable you to sustain this connection to this resource. Because remember, the physics of spirituality is like attracts like. Two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. But the shape, the composition, the condition of your physical body, how the segments of your body line up, the range of motion you have at your articulations, are all variables that will give us clues as to what it is that we resonate to. What is it that our bodies long for? And trying to make that connection initially, most people will find is a little bit of a challenge. But if you are employing everything that we are recommending, and you wake up in the morning and you start your day with skillful use of thought, skillful use of breath, you keep yourself hydrated. You start nurturing yourself with good food, and like you had suggested, you learn to combine foods in a way that you assimilate nourishment from your food, so that you don't have to rely on stimulants and all kinds of external things that would produce dependencies upon themselves, so that you could keep the mind-body complex attuned to this invisible, intangible resource. And then it doesn't matter what you're doing during the day. It doesn't matter where you go to work, that you will always have the ability to shape your inner state to fit the demands of the outside world. You will always put yourself in a position of strength that you can change how you think and how you feel about whatever it is that you're doing. And in the framework of doing that, you are now engaged in your life. You are totally supported internally. So the concept of being detached from the outside world is still intact. And then, of course, you are able to give out because you're drawing from a resource of energy that's inexhaustible. So this is where you start to get into more of the features and the benefits of why would I want to do that? Why would I want to give up coffee in the morning? Why would I want to give up chocolate for my break? Because you get a much better return with the life force, because it gives you benefits that we talk about, that the life force gives us virtue to overcome fear. It gives us wisdom to overcome ignorance. It gives us this sense of purpose to overcome selfishness. And it gives us enthusiasm to overcome laziness. And so this process that we call apotheosis, this process of the human becoming divine, does have merit, but it's an exchange. There's that old saying, you can't get there from here. You can't be embroiled in the physical world and still be spiritual. And that seems to be one of the misconceptions that has spilled out into what I call the New Age celebrity pseudo-spiritual movements that we witness today, of people pretending to be doing better than they really are.
Well, and it certainly sounds like that if we start with that skillful use of thought and skillful use of breath, and then we work our way down to the other things, that it will also help create a balance with everything. I know in your notes we talked about, I've read about a yogi is mindful of all the departments in the life. So if we start with something, then we can spill those same strategies in all the other departments that are in our life that we use the labyrinth for.
Oh, exactly. That again, that's where it starts to really open up, that your practice of yoga, this perfect practice of yoga, is a path of action, it's a path of knowledge, and it's a path of devotion. And however you're going to break that down, that there are things that you can and you must do in order to get the best result. And there are things that you may do that will undermine your ability to get that result. But the key is you want to be able to recognize what it's going to look like when you have the benefit of internal support. Because if you don't have that in place, you can continue to what the Yoga Sutras call avidya, ignorance. You're mistaking the impermanent for the permanent. The Bible called that false gods. That we're drawing from a resource of energy that is still limiting, but we think we're spiritual. And so that becomes probably the single most important thing that you want to be able to do, is recognize, what does it look like when I am using what I really do need to produce the feeling that I'm happy? Because it is the secret to life. It is the common thread that is expressed in all of the religions of this world.
Wow, what a great show today. I can't believe it's about that time. We have to start closing down our program. So in closing, I'd like to invite you listeners out there to visit our website. You can follow Swami on Pinterest and Twitter and, of course, on Facebook. Be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. And then once there, you can post comments about this show or any ideas for shows you may want us to consider. But keep those comments, questions, and curiosities coming, because Swami does enjoy hearing from you. And be sure to tune in next week. We'll discuss the Assumption of Mary, which is celebrated on August 15th. You can email me at lisa@ipdtransform.com with any questions you would like Swami to answer. So, Swami, before we go, any final thoughts or comments about today's discussion or about our topic next week?
Well, I would like to encourage people to maybe make some changes in your everyday choices. And the whole key here is that oftentimes this practice of yoga is met with a lot of resistance, and that comes from our physical bodies. Our bodies really don't want to change. But the thing that you want to remember is your body is like a monkey. And a monkey won't let go of one branch unless it has another branch in the other hand. And the whole key to a yoga practice is not to give up anything, but to substitute. So start using what you need. Start making commercials for yourself so that the things that are really important to you, like the availability of your next breath, becomes important to you, more important than what it is that you're putting in your mouth. And when you do that, then, of course, it doesn't negate what you're going to put in your mouth, but it makes it small, makes it more manageable. And then, of course, you do have the benefit of internal support. And so with that, I'd wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
And thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.